Hello, everyone. My name is James Kong, Trip Group 17, and today I will be presenting the highlights and takeaways from my spring 2026 internship at Mercuria. For today's agenda, I'll first go into the internship overview, then I'll dive into my first main project, my second main project, some additional side projects and additional learning, and finally, the key takeaways from my time at Mercuria. Maybe you're wondering what's the business context of my role. Well, the team I was placed on was the North America Power and Gas Market Risk Desk, working as a cross-commodity market risk analyst, with the focus being monitoring exposure across our internal business units. The scope of that work includes first reporting, market analysis, and additional tasks such as workflow improvements, option valuation, and counterparty analysis in my free time. The tools and methods I use for my work included softwares like Excel, Python, SQL, and Tableau to perform data cleaning and statistical analysis. The topics I focused on and enjoyed learning the most included product knowledge, market structure, and trade positioning. The first main project I worked on was an origination performance dashboard. And so at the very top, you can see kind of the main metrics that are pretty useful. We have running sum of origination revenue by trade year, origination revenue by commodity, and by industry. So in order to get here, there was a main problem, which was that there was no table with aggregated deal performance details like unit margin, revenue, deal length, and volume. So the solution was to build a custom SQL query to bring together the data that was scattered across our internal tables and different databases. There was also data that existed on separate servers, so I ended up using Tableau's relationships feature to bring it all into the same view within the Tableau application. During this process, I got to seek input from not just the risk team, but also middle office, power origination, front office tech, and compliance to see how the dashboard can best serve end users and also to gain familiarity with our information systems. So as you can see here, boxed in the red, a notable feature is the forward period matrix. So the forward period just represents the deal start date less the deal trade date, and it answers the key commercial question of, on average, how long did it take for deals to start in a certain year, and what is the total revenue, volume, and average unit margin for that year? So in this visual, on the y-axis, we have the trade years, and on the x-axis, we have the quarters, and on the primary x-axis, we have the kind of forward period buckets, so 0 to 12 months, 13 to 24, 25 to 36, and 37 to 60. At the very bottom, we have the quarters within those buckets. And all of this can be easily toggled to see a certain counterparty or commodity and even individual originator. So second section of this is pretty similar to the first one, but this one focuses on duration period instead. So that's just the deal tenor, the deal maturity date, less the deal start date, represented in months. And so that answers the key question of, on average, how long are the deals that start in a certain year, and what is the total revenue, volume, and average unit margin for that year. The second main project I worked on was an exchange liquidity dashboard. I first started with natural gas and then moved on to power. So this example shown here is power, and there's a lot to look at. So let's first start off with the very top section. You see that there's two lines. One's blue, one's purple. And the blue one represents the exchange, whereas the purple one represents the nodal exchange. And you may be wondering, why do these settlement prices differ? And the reason for that is because of different exchange clearing mechanisms, even for the same curve, no matter if it's uh, the same price band or same index asset, because of those exchange mechanisms, uh, you can see that sometimes there can be a large discrepancy. In the very middle, you have the first key metric that this dashboard focuses on, which is the delta lots over volume ratio. And that ratio is represented by the line. And these lines are relative, so whenever it spikes all the way to the top, it doesn't mean that we are 100% of the volume for a certain day. Um, it's just a better way to reflect the changes in our positions. And the red bars represent our notional uh, delta lots. So it's kind of a good comparison to see the actual lots versus the ratio of the daily volume. And you have the same idea in the very bottom, but this time it's with the our net open position over total open interest for a certain day. So the days are represented on the x-axis as a time series, and you may be wondering what's the deal with the light blue and the dark blue. Dark blue represents our net open position. So if that were positive, then it'd be above the x-axis or the y-axis. If it's negative, it'd be below the y-axis. And the light blue represents the remaining open interest out there on the market for a given day. So if you add those two up, it would represent the total open interest. And again, this visual can be toggled by different index assets, market regions, contract years, price bands. And all this really answers the key commercial question of how much of the market do I make up for a given curve and on a given day. So the very last key metric, you can see the third bullet point, volume open interest, is represented in this next visual. And because this is not our position data, but rather just pure market data, it's pretty useful to see how other market participants are reacting on a historical basis. So within this specific example, we have ERCOT North selected as our index group, and the contract month is February 2027. And around February 15th to 16th, we see a huge spike in activity. And that was around Winter Storm Firm. So hedgers were probably taking the opportunity to lock in those higher prices for the next calendar year. This is another section of the liquidity dashboard. And on the x-axis, we have contract months. So this time, individual days are just a filter for the entire visual. So this is really helpful for answering the key question of how does a forward curve for a given market hub compare to the forward curve, let's say 7 days ago or 1 or 2 months ago? It's good to get a macro level understanding of what market expectations were and how they changed. This section of the dashboard is really helpful for people trying to see the price spread between two hubs across different price bands. And this is kind of a similar concept to the previous one shown, where the contract months are on the x-axis. So here you can select an individual day, and in this example, we have January 2nd and January 2nd and April 17th selected to compare the two forward curves for those 2 days. The blue represents the basis spread for ICE, and the orange represents the basis spread on nodal, and the red just represents the difference between the two exchanges for the spreads. And again, that's because of the difference in clearing mechanisms between the two exchanges. Finally, I compiled all the data together into a daily automated price report or ratio report for end users. And on the left side is the lots over volume ratio. On the right side is the open position over open interest ratio. And so this report just runs every morning to reflect the previous day's activity, and it's all aggregated by contract year. So it gives kind of a bird eye view of all the different index groups and how market participants are behaving compared to our activity. And this example is for natural gas. Natural gas doesn't have price bands, so it made things a lot easier. So this is the primary view for that. And I also created a daily email report in a similar format to the previous one, but for natural gas as well. A major side project I worked on was an HQ ISO tie flows and implied price analysis. So the Power Analytics desk thought it'd be a good exercise for me to figure out why New York ISO would be flooded with HQ ISO imports, even when day-ahead prices in New York hubs were already pretty low. And the theory was HQ ISO's hydrogen surplus uh, is causing them to ignore market economics. So my job was to prove this with data. So I compiled yes energy data from our database into Python and ran event studies where the bounds were uh, 6 hours before the event and 6 hours after the event. And the event is defined as net flow switching from importing to New York to exporting from New York. And so the example on the very left is when flows switched to importing to New York. And we can see that there is there's 41 instances in which that happened, with there being a median change in net surplus of 969 megawatts in Quebec. So that's represented by the blue line going up, and the dotted orange line represents a proxy spread. And I use the real-time New York Ontario spread because Quebec actually doesn't publish any of their prices. So that was the next best option based on some of the regressions I ran. And so this kind of study basically proved our initial assumption, which was that because of their scheduled dam releases from managing different water levels in Quebec, they would just ignore the price that they were going to get just to offload the power. At the very right is the opposite event where flows go from importing to New York to exporting from New York. And the relationship isn't as strong here, but you can see that whenever the net surplus in Quebec goes down, so they're tightening, the balances are tightening up there in terms of the water or the megawatt net surplus. This proxy spread kind of reverts back to normal instead of decreasing like it did on the left graph. So based on that, I thought it'd be a good exercise to try to find Quebec's implied price to get a better understanding of their behavior. So I developed an implied HQ price formula based on a ranking methodology from the tie flow weightings and highest and lowest price. And the reason why this works is because Quebec is geographically constrained and also constrained in terms of its grid. There are three interfaces for Quebec, which is Ontario, which is IESO, represented in the red line for the price on this graph. Second ISO is New England ISO, and the third ISO is New York ISO. And so based on that, we can observe where flows are going on in a given day, every hour, and come up with a weighting based on the flow weightings. And so you can apply that weighting to the prices that these three ISOs the aggregated prices that they have. And based on the flow direction, so let's say HQ was importing from New England, that means that New England would have the lowest price of the three. And if HQ was exporting to, let's say, Ontario, that means Ontario was offering the highest price of the three ISOs. So that's what the formula is based on. And it's a good methodology to see how um, they're running their economic decisions, even when they aren't acting economically rational. Another learning exercise I did was building out a daily lower 48 gas supply and demand balance. Um, so Brian from Gas Origination, he wanted a reference where he could build a brief report off of to send out to his clients to stay in their inboxes. So he didn't want any of the data to be from our internal databases. So I gathered some Platts data, queried it into Excel, and formatted it into a coherent balance. So here we have the individual line items for supply, demand, and storage and balancing. And it was a really good kind of daily routine for me to just come in every morning, refresh it with the most recent day, and then look at any changes in the balances. So at the very top, we have the actuals, and at the very bottom, we have the day over day deltas. So it'd be um, pretty good for me to observe the changes and then compare it to the price action for the day. So I'd load up a chart on TradingView and see how the market was reacting. And even though I know that there were a lot of different factors going into the price action, it was still a good baseline for me to understand. And so some other tasks I engaged in fell into three buckets. The first one being origination. So I was able to get my hands on some work that included a workflow improvement for the derivative sales pipeline, some option valuation to see if writing a weather-based derivative for power made sense, daily automated client email report, and an energy asset summary for senior leadership to prepare for their meeting with a new CEO. The second bucket was market analysis. So I was able to get work for doing things like analyzing a certain basis hub and weather station heating degree day relationship through regressions, trying to find a delta neutral or hedging away Henry Hub risk without adding a contract leg to different basis time spreads. I also worked on a report that gathered all the virtual trading fees for the Northeastern ISOs for Power Analytics Desk, and finally did a sensitivity analysis for diesel and trucking rates for metals operations. An extracurricular activity I participated in was the UT Austin Energy Trading Competition, where my team placed second place out of 35 plus teams for a physical gas case study. So another Mercuria Spring intern and I teamed up with Joe Matasso and Nathan Ham in Group 17 for this. And we were given a case, again, for being a gas producer with production to market. And we presented which of the given storage and pipeline acquisition options, in addition to our unique trading strategy, would result in the highest intrinsic and extrinsic value. So after the competition, I even had the opportunity to present this case to our risk and middle office team back at Mercuria to give some additional insights into the physical gas markets. So the key takeaways from this internship was first really getting to understand the role of market risk and middle office, and understanding that in order to deal with all the challenges that they face on a daily basis, creativity is everything. So can't really take no for an answer. You just have to find a way around certain hard problem that you're dealing with. And going off of that, a helpful way of doing that is communicating not just within your team, but with other teams. So, for example, for my first main project, I got to work with all those different desks and really gave me some insights as to how to figure out to compile all the data together. And so not only can this fulfill our internal company needs, but also to serve our external counterparty needs. And finally, gathering market data and doing all this quantitative modeling and sensitivity and scenario analysis only matters to derive extrinsic commercial value for the firm. Finally, I want to thank Cody and Vet, my manager for risk, and everyone else that supported me in my learning journey. Really meant a lot, and I really enjoyed my time at Mercuria. Thank you.